as always, thank you so much for tuning in and taking this journey inside the Black Vault with me. I'm your host, John Greenewald Jr., founder and creator of theblackvault.com, and thank you for joining me as we do this deep dive into the release, or at least the partial release, of the classified UAP report. Now, if you haven't seen any of the news articles, I'm very thankful that quite a few different media agencies and outlets have covered this now, where since June of last year, I have tried to get the classified version of the UFO or UAP report that was released last year to the public, the classified version reviewed and released to the public. That process has taken until this week to complete. Excited to say that I actually got the declassified version, although heavily redacted. It is still incredibly important. So what I am going to do today is dissect it for you guys. We're going to do, like I called it, a deep dive. I know these aren't for everyone, but we're going to go through it page by page and compare it to the public version that we saw last year. There's a lot of differences. There's a lot of redactions, as I already noted, and even those redactions tell a story. So if you haven't seen those news stories, that's a quick overview of what is going on and what we are going to be doing on this particular episode. Now, as you can see here, I brought up some visuals. For those who aren't aware, if you are listening to the audio version, I do drop these down to audio podcasts on every major audio podcast platform under the Black Vault Radio. Some of you may be just listening to that and not realizing that I do visual presentations as well. If you're interested in seeing the visuals that I'm going to often reference through this, go to www.theblackvault.com/live. That will take you to the YouTube channel. You can go ahead and search for the video there and make sure you like and subscribe because that is a huge help on the channel. I know it sounds simplistic and I beat the dead horse with it every episode, but it really does help the channel grow. So thank you. We are now over 50,000 subscribers strong here. And in the last week, thank you to those who have decided to subscribe. I'm guessing a lot of you that are watching this right now may be new to the channel. So what you are about to watch is what this channel is all about, dissecting the evidence. Sometimes videos are longer, sometimes they're shorter, but regardless, it's about the evidence, and that's what we're going to be diving into. So let me go ahead and start with the PowerPoint presentation here. What I want to start with, for those who are either taking notes or just want a little bit of background on how I did this, a lot of news outlets erroneously mentioned the Freedom of Information Act, and although that is what I am known for, this particular case was not that. It was through a process called a mandatory declassification review. Very much echoes a Freedom of Information Act request. Essentially, you're requesting a review of a classified document or classified material for public release. And so that is essentially what we are looking at here, and that is the result of that MDR request. Now, I usually don't do this, but I decided to make the entire process public when it comes to this particular case. I did it for a couple different reasons. I did it to, number one, show the agency the interest that the general public had in watching this unfold, and that was palpable with the different posts and how many people were watching and looking at it and so on, but also to show everybody what that process is. And what I was surprised at was how long it took. When I originally undertook this, I was under the impression that I would likely get something within about 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks. And that's what I had posted out there. Of course, nothing ever follows through when it comes to the U.S. government. So those estimates really kind of fell to the wayside. My follow-ups through this process lasted up until literally the beginning of this week. I was unaware that they were going to complete the case this week, and they numbered well into the double digits. So I was trying to not annoy them to death, but many of those follow-ups that I would send would just go unanswered. And I ended up filing an appeal last month, maybe two months ago, to try and get this expedited. That appeal was rejected. I actually couldn't file the appeal until a full calendar year had passed from the filing, because I was appealing the time it was taking. So I learned that part of the process the hard way. But regardless, I was able to maybe show them, hey, once June rolled around, which was the year mark, I was going to file that appeal in hopes to get this declassified. So that, I think, maybe, and it's a speculation, but I maybe jump-started the process a little bit. But the agency surprisingly responded this week. And so my follow-up, where I had no idea I'd be getting it, that follow-up was met with, hey, good news, it's in the mail. And so I practically begged through a telephone call. I called the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, and I said, look, I've been very eagerly awaiting this. Is there any possible way you can send it electronically? And the rest is history. I was able to do that, and special thanks to that agency, because even though it was a little bit of a frustrating process, they were really kind of meeting me halfway, and they went and scanned it and sent it to me yesterday. So thanks to them for that. I want to talk, before we deep dive into the document itself, a controversy that's re-erupted here in these last couple of days and this week. Since I published this document, obviously it has gotten a lot of traction. Now, if you're new to this channel, you may not be aware, but through the last 8 months or so, there has been a lot of controversy about how big the classified report was that was given to Congress. And there's been a lot of speculation, we'll call it, that some of the estimates were 74 pages, 70 pages, 78 pages, 400 pages, all from people that were either claiming firsthand knowledge or that they had impeccable anonymous sources. And when I wrote the story last year, where although I didn't publish the report because I didn't have it yet, my legal case had progressed to the point where I learned it was a 17-page document. It was July 16th of last year where I published a small story that the classified version was 17 pages. I felt that was newsworthy simply because there were so many numbers that were being thrown around. Now, just so you guys are aware, and before I get to Jimmy's interview, this here, let me get the pen here so I can point. 74 pages came from Mr. Luis Elizondo. Out of all of the sources I'm about to mention, I would say he is probably the most well-connected. I have no doubts that he maintains a lot of connections that he has talked about. And I thought if anybody was right, it was going to be him. So when I got the 17-page return, I was a little surprised. I'm going to come back to Luis Elizondo in a moment. The 400-page estimate came from his attorney, Daniel Sheehan. Daniel said that on Fade to Black with Jimmy Church. I'll pull up the transcript for you in a moment, because that really added a lot more confusion to this process as well. 70 pages was, let me see, Bob McGuire. He claims to also have impeccable anonymous sources. I believe this was on Spaced Out Radio, and in between some of the segments, it was broadcast on YouTube. He seemed very animated and very enthusiastic that it was 70 pages. 78 pages came from, let me see here, I believe it was Tim McMillan on another interview roundtable discussion. He works for The Debrief. So there were a lot of different page counts that were being floated around here. So when I got 17 pages, I thought, okay, what's going on here? The reason I wanted to go back to Luis Elizondo is I've been accused of not reaching out to him and only trying to attack him. Yet again, those allegations are false. So just to clear up the record, last July, I did reach out to Luis Elizondo and wanted to explore this discrepancy. I invited him to add whatever he wanted to add. Sadly, I was talking to his PR people at the time, even though I was speaking to Mr. Elizondo as well through other means. It was his PR people that kind of took the helm to respond to my request. And essentially, to speed up the story, he didn't want to put anything on the record. So I respected that and I moved on. So just to clear up those allegations, which are circulating social media that I never went to Mr. Elizondo to clear this up. I did, and he chose not to respond. I didn't make a big deal out of it, but since I'm being accused of so much from the haters nowadays, here in the last few days, about this controversy, hey, let me clear it up right now. I did do my due diligence. No one will go on the record with me. And to add even more confusion, Mr. Elizondo's attorney, Daniel Sheehan, as I said that it was over 400 pages. You can see in the transcript here on YouTube during his interview that it was over 400. Jimmy Church is a great interviewer. He asked some great questions. He brought up the 78-page number here. And you can see the response from Danny Sheehan that it was a myth, that it was part of the mythology in ufology that has arisen. Again, this is part of that confusion. So I wanted to bring that up and kind of address the controversy that I welcome anybody with any knowledge of this to come forward. Some of you may be eye rolling right now. Why does it matter the length of the report? Well, you're absolutely right. But sadly, there's a lot of people coming after me accusing the agency of lying or accusing me of working with the agency to circulate something that isn't true. That's all internet legend and lore. And since some influential accounts are kind of circulating that, I thought that I would go ahead and address it here on this deep dive. Moving on from the controversy, because again, it is a 17-page document if you haven't caught on yet. So that reporting last year was 100% spot on, and nobody has brought evidence to refute that. But the invitation's open if they ever do. I want to deal with the exemptions first. Those redactions when under either the Freedom of Information Act or an MDR, when things are redacted, what happens is they have to cite the redaction. And what I mean by that is that they have to justify them removing information. So in the FOIA world, you guys have probably heard me talk about B1, which is national security related information, or B6, which is personally identifying information. There's 9 total, but those are some of the more common ones. In the process of an MDR, it works the exact same way, but you don't see the same exemptions. You see other ones. Most of them are going to be tied to an executive order, which specifically is 13526. That was kind of the going, or is the going standard for these types of declassification reviews and what should remain exempted. You'll also see some other references as well, but I want to kind of keep it as simple as I can because it can get pretty confusing. So from that letter that I had showed you, the release letter, the ODNI will reference what they are redacting and kind of summarize it all for you. What the ODNI said was that they were citing United States Code, let me see here, Chapter 50, Section 3024, which is information pertaining to intelligence sources and methods, and the National Security Act of 1947 as amended. Also, the Chapter 50, Section 3605, which protects against disclosure of NSA functions and information. This is probably, some of the maybe spying, some of the decoding of messages, some of the intelligence gathering around the world. That's what the NSA does. And so the information that they're bringing in, which may touch the UAP topic and be in this report, they're going to go ahead and exempt it to you. To break it down even farther, Executive Order 13526, they cited 4 A, C, D, and G. A, C, D, and G. Yes. Sorry, I get myself tongue-tied. 4 different reasons. In fact, there's actually 5 in the document itself, so they messed up. They didn't cite one. But regardless, and we'll kind of touch back on this as we go through the document, that Section 1.4A pertains to military plans, weapon systems, or operations. C pertains to intelligence activities, including covert action, intelligence sources and methods, or cryptology. D pertains to foreign relations or foreign activities of the U.S., including confidential sources. and G, vulnerabilities or capabilities of systems, installations, infrastructures, projects, plans, or protection services related to national security. The fifth that I saw mentioned in the report, which was not in their letter, was E, scientific, technological, or economic matters related to national security. So we'll revisit that as we go through the documents, because, that may seem dry and boring as heck. And why is John doing this? Well, it's for two reasons. One, it is a deep dive, so we're really kind of dissecting this all together. But number two, why those exemptions are important is when you go through a document, you can start to fill in the holes a little bit. Even though it's a black line, those exemption citations allow you to figure out exactly what or why they are redacting something. And so that really helps. They also cite Section 6.2, general provisions of the executive order. I'm only going to read this once and won't touch it again because I don't even understand it. But it is cited in the document a few times. Let me read it to you. Nothing in this order limits the protection afforded any information by other provisions of law, including the Constitution, Freedom of Information Act exemptions, the Privacy Act of 1974, and the National Security Act of 1947 as amended. This order is not intended to and does not create any right or benefit, substantive or procedural, enforceable at law by a party against the United States, its departments, agencies, or entities, its officers, employees, or agents, or any other person. The foregoing is in addition to the specific provisos set forth in sections 1.1b, 3.1c, and 5.3e of this order. Don't worry, I ain't going to go back to it because I don't care to, but I wanted to read it for you, at least for the audio version, but also to just kind of tell you guys, they cite that as well. But to be honest with you, I really just don't get it. There's really kind of no reason because the other exemptions pretty much make sense. So let's start going through the 17 pages. What I've done here is on the left side of your screen here on the display, if you're watching this, it's going to be the classified newly released version. On the right side, labeled public report, I split up every single page of that report to coincide with the classified version. That way you can visually see how they took the classified version and then truncated it to death, dropping roughly about half of it and making the public version. So I kind of line up the sections, and you'll also see some minor word changes. I'm not going to go over all of those because it's just kind of pointless. Obviously, they had a working version and then likely, polished it up a little bit for the public, but the classified version in some areas is just worded a little differently. I will point out one or two, but just know you may find some of those slight changes that I don't reference. That's why it's just kind of irrelevant. But I wanted to show you the side by side and how much more information is actually revealed here. Even though there's a lot of redactions, we can read a lot also. A couple things I'll point out about the cover page. This here is the classification. It is referenced as that section 3024I, protection of intelligence sources and methods. I'm guessing, and this is just a guess, that there is a classification with a code word here. So they remove the whole thing because it may reveal, again, a type of program. Prime example is if you look at the National Security Agency documents on UFOs, because they deal with comment or communication intelligence, a lot of them have a UMBRA, UMBRA, code word on it. So it's top secret / UMBRA. For a lot of years, UMBRA was a classified designator, and so that was fully redacted. Over years of fighting, I filed MDR requests to the NSA, very much like I did here, and got a lot of those documents re-released with UMBRA revealed. That's what I think is going on here. Again, that part is a little bit of speculation, but that's why these redactions are there. You'll see them every single page. Juxtapose that with the public report, unclassified designator, obviously not redacted for any reason. Classified by, that's going to be a person. Protection of intelligence sources and method, again, is 3024. But when you go down here, you're talking about the subsection that protects identities. derived from. They also are classifying that. If I were to guess, this is the UAP Security Classification Guide that was released last year to me that I published. The reason I say that is UAP-related documents often cite that security classification guide. OD&I may not have realized it was released already, and so they redacted the reference to it. I will be appealing a lot of these redactions when I'm recording this. I'm still stewing in my brain how I'm going to address some of it, but just so you know, that's on my agenda, is to appeal redactions like this to see what's under there. Declassify on, generally that's 30 plus years into the future, and they redacted that date for whatever reason. But anyway, just a quick rundown of what you're seeing there. Here is page 2, the scope and assumptions. You'll see it's very, very similar to the public report. But there's one thing that I want to hone in on, and so I'm going to just go into one paragraph here. This was the difference. First thing to note, 1.4c, right? That's from the Executive Order 13526. Intelligence activities, including covert action, intelligence sources or methods, or cryptology. Now, we know that the NSA is already referenced here, so it's not them. There's speculation on whether or not it is the CIA. A lot of people are making guesses online. Regardless, this is an agency that was not in the public report and that they don't want to tell you about. So again, whether or not that's the CIA or someone else, who knows? Just speculation. But I found it pretty fascinating that they do have input from another agency that they don't want to tell you about. Another interesting difference, which may have just been an oversight, was the classified version had the Marine Corps in it, and also NASA. Now, if you're watching this channel in the past, you'll know that I've discovered some of those NASA briefings, which likely was the UAP task force reaching out to NASA, sharing information, and then ultimately NASA contributing to the report. Where's NASA down here? In the public report, their reference was removed. Was it a mistake, an oversight? I'll let you guys decide, but those are two clear differences. The Office of Naval Intelligence, which is essentially where the UAP task force was headquartered, was listed in the public report, but nowhere to be found in the classified report. That's minor. Again, probably just an oversight, but something I wanted to at least note. Navy's there. Navy's there on both versions, but Navy O&I is not. Again, just kind of one of those things that you got to point out, but who knows why. Digging into the executive summary totals 1 page, just to kind of dispel another myth that a lot of people talk about. They feel that the executive summary in total was 17 pages and the classified version was much, much longer. That is also untrue. The executive summary was a 1-page summary of the entire report, and then, as you'll see as we go on, are the different sections thereof. The one minor difference here was in this paragraph. In a limited number of incidents, UAP reportedly appeared to exhibit unusual flight characteristics. The public version put a period there. The classified version goes into more detail, saying, including several in which and then we got some blackout line there, involving, and then yet again, all blacked out. The citations, A, E, and G, military plans, weapon systems, operations, scientific, technological, or economic matters, and vulnerabilities or capabilities of systems. So obviously they are going into detail about their capability here or lack thereof within military operations. Public didn't get to see that. Obviously we don't get to see all of it, but we get a glimpse that they have more to tell about this phenomena. Now we're getting into pages that have a lot more information. Available reporting largely inconclusive. Public version said the same thing, broke down the cases, 144 of these reports, 80 involved observation with multiple sensors. But when you look at over here on the classified version just released, after carefully considering this information, the UAPTF focused on a data set of blank, probably describing blank, those blanks being redacted. This is the one difference here that I'm going to point out that is kind of a minor word change, but I think very, very interesting to see how they tell the public one thing, but also tell Congress the same thing, but in my opinion, has a much different tone to it. the public version first, we were able to identify one reported UAP with high confidence. In that case, we identified the object as a large deflating balloon. The version Congress got, in only one instance, the UAPTF was able to identify the reported UAP with high confidence. In that case, we identified the object as a large deflating balloon. The others remain unexplained. This is just a personal opinion, but I see that as a much softer way to say it to the public and a much more negative way to say it to Congress, meaning in only one, we were able to do this, where the public said, hey, we were able to do this. For me, I'd see a tone difference. I know I'm just reading it, but for me, I read the tone difference. Again, I'm not going to do that a lot here in this presentation, but I did want to notate that because I feel that there's very much a different message by saying the same thing, but very much a different tone to that message in the classified version. You get down to, again, the breakdown of the reports. You'll see here that in the classified version of these 80 reports involved observations with multiple sensors. Public version had a period there. The expansion says including and redacted and then more redactions. The remaining blank redaction, observed incidents were captured by and then redacted again. See tables 1 and 2. Put a pin in the tables 1 and 2 because we're going to get to those. But the area here, when you talk about military plans, weapon systems, and operations, the citation here under A, we're obviously getting to the capabilities of our military. So some of those redactions, I would say, are acceptable. It's the reason why redactions are there. It's frustrating and even laughable when you try and read it out loud. But when you look at it, you kind of start to understand where they're talking about our weapon systems capabilities, our detection capabilities, so on, as you read through this. And those, I would say, are acceptable, but not all are. And we're now getting into that section. In the classified version, not in the public, of the 144 U.S. government reports, we don't know how many, originated from, because it's redacted, originated from Navy range fowler reports, which provide basic information, such as the time, date, location, description, and what occurred during the event. Again, a redacted number. Reports were from a combination of Air Force, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, and other agencies. So again, it was at the Marine Corps that wasn't mentioned in the public version, but they were in the classified version. Well, this is probably why, because we now know that there are Marine Corps incidents. And yes, I have filed requests to them for what those incidents may be. Why did they shield that from the U.S. public? I don't know in the public version, but regardless, they did. Only, and a redacted number of the 144 reports contained and then redacted A and G, which again, military plans, weapon systems, or operations. And then G, thought I had it in my notes, vulnerabilities or capabilities of systems installations. So the vulnerabilities are going to be G. Sorry, I have a cheat sheet on all of those breakdowns here too. Thought I had it on the screen, but I did not. So anyway, you could see how kind of confusing this gets, but it starts to get into capabilities of UAP and our lack of ability to either detect or track or chase or identify what these are. You'll see here a lot more redaction, not in the public report. Although these reports, a bunch of redaction, the description of unknown targets, bunch of redaction. That's all C. Intelligence activities. That's the exemption. Intelligence activities, including covert action, intelligence sources or methods. You'll see down here is the definition of a range fowler that's referred to up here. And then there's a footnote citation. Not sure if you can see that on your screen, but it says U.S. Navy aviators define a range fowler as an activity or object that interrupts pre-planned training or other military activity in a military operating area or restricted airspace. Moving on, you can see how this kind of chunks together with the public report, but expanded, and the UAP collection challenges. This really gets into our capability, so the redactions are understandable. Here's something in the classified version. The sensors mounted on U.S. military platforms are typically designed to fulfill specific missions, often redacted. As a result, those sensors are not generally suited for identifying UAP, which can be, and then redacted. These are starting to get interesting because, again, although some are understandably done, meaning the redactions, others are not. And it's the capability of UAP. But it kind of is a gray area where it also, when we reveal the capability of UAP, sadly, it will reveal our lack of ability to either detect, track, identify, and so on. And so then, for me, I'm mad at that redaction, but can kind of understand it. Jumping down here, but some potential patterns do emerge. We can see a very similar paragraph here, but below that, more information. And this, I believe, is what resonated most with the general public when it came to what was redacted. Let me read to you what was revealed. The most common shape described by military personnel in their reporting was A, redacted. See Figure 1. So we'll get to Figure 1 with the tables in a moment. Military aviators describe many of these redacted objects as redacted or redacted. That redacted. Several sightings were redacted and resembled redacted shapes, like A, redacted, or A, redacted. All right, so here's the frustration. Why are shapes redacted? I don't get it, to be honest with you, but that is the reality behind what we're looking at. I will be appealing this at length as well. I do not believe the shape of something would be classified. I don't see a justification for it. There's no identifying markers. There is no attribution to any country, military branch, foreign or domestic, nothing. So there's no connection there that would reveal sources and methods, nothing that would reveal anything of a classified nature. So why are they withholding the shapes? This, to me, was one of the more intriguing aspects to this release. Why the physical characteristics of something? Why is that something that they cannot reveal? The citation is mostly A here, which are military plans, weapon systems, or operations. One may argue that it fits into descriptions of our own technology, but let me dispel that myth at this point. You'll see later as well, they could not attribute any of the cases that they investigated to classified domestic technology. So why, again, are the shapes classified? This here, let me see here, continues the section we were just on. Let me continue reading. Observed UAP usually traveled between redacted and redacted. So likely speeds are being redacted there. Altitudes varied for these objects, but frequently registered between redacted and redacted. So obviously the altitude numbers as well, redacted. Mean sea level. So frequently registered between blank and blank mean sea level, or MSL. We have a redacted number of cases, however, in which the observer perceived that the UAP demonstrated redacted, and another in which the UAP was detected redacted feet MSL. So obviously redacting another altitude here, which I am going to argue in the appeal should not be concealed, but rather revealed. Reason being, we know our capabilities, it's public knowledge, that we can determine altitudes of tracks that we see with our equipment. That is not revealing any classified information. So why don't they want to tell us that UAP are flying between this height and that height? I don't know. There may be some military strategy to withhold that, or military reason for national security. Okay, I just personally don't see it. Feel free to comment below if you'd like. You may disagree with me, and that's fine. I just feel that it's not blowing any secret, as their citation is A, military plans, weapon systems, or operations. I just don't see it. Moving on to the section, and a handful of UAP appear to demonstrate advanced technology. In 18 incidents described in 21 reports, observers reported unusual UAP movement patterns or flight characteristics. Public version put a period there. In the classified version, and or redacted. A few of these reports describe UAP behavior, and then a lot more redaction. Some UAP appear to remain stationary in winds aloft, move against the wind, maneuver abruptly, or move at considerable speed without discernible means of propulsion. In a small number of cases, military aircraft systems processed radio frequency energy associated with UAP sightings. Public version, put a period there. Classified version as redacted. Although there are redacted, we would redacted. Recordings of radar displays suggest these UAP. A couple more redacted lines. Citations were G. Vulnerabilities or capabilities of systems, installations, or infrastructure. So obviously what the UAP are doing, we are unable to do what we need to do with track and to track and identify them. Justifiable redaction, I'll let you guys decide. Next paragraph, in redacted, a Navy pilot in a redacted lines, in altitude. He noted the winds aloft were greater than redacted, and he was fighting to keep his aircraft in the airspace. Redacted was redacted, and its position was unaffected by the redacted. What could be there is kind of interesting. Unaffected by what? The pilot, redacted line, object was redacted. So let me just dissect that for a moment. It's saying that the Navy pilot was in winds greater than, but they wouldn't tell us how great. And that he was, quote, fighting to keep his aircraft in the airspace. That's an exact quote in the document, which means it was a quote from the witness. But it seems when you read the redacted lines that the UAP, whatever that was unaffected by the, wind? Did we shoot at it? Unaffected by what? Radar jamming? It's a very small redaction. It's right here. Position was unaffected by the, it looks like you could probably only fit, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 6 characters there. So if it was winds, why would you redact it? I'm not really sure. The citation is A and G, military plans, weapon systems, or operations. G, vulnerabilities or capabilities. So what's there? That's another one of those ones that really doesn't make sense. Other ones do, and they're obvious. Other ones do not. Moving on, in redacted, a Navy report documented, redacted, but then appeared to change course and speed. Redacted from redacted. These are longer redactions. They don't look like speed and numbers, maybe, but it just looks a little bit longer. Regardless, you can see here, obviously, intelligently controlled. So not a balloon, not a trash bag flying in the wind. Drone, of course, maybe. But regardless, you are seeing intelligently controlled craft that are being encountered. So just punching that point. Moving on, in blank or redacted, a UAP exhibited, redacted. According to redacted, the UAPTF has a redacted number, additional reports of aircraft indicating redacted that appear to redacted. I'm giving you these kind of rough readings, again, not only for the audio version, but to see how some of this just doesn't make sense. That we should not be encroaching on classified information here. That we should be able to talk about the characteristics of what they are seeing. When we talk about vulnerabilities, okay, I can understand that. But some of these characteristics, in my opinion, should not be redacted. Moving on to this last paragraph before we turn the page. The UAPTF holds a small amount of data that appear to show UAP demonstrating acceleration or a degree of signature management. Public version, put a period there. Redacted version, classified version comes in with some redacted lines. However, this, and then another redacted line, and then it goes on from there. According to redacted, during a redacted incident, the UAP, what is the descriptor here, which doesn't make sense. But again, redacted. So during a whatever redaction here incident, the UAP from the aircraft redacted. shows the object redacted. A 2004 UAP event reportedly demonstrated redacted. 2004, I think we can all safely assume that that is the Nimitz encounter. So they're dealing with a couple different incidents here, kind of giving a summation of them and the characteristics of UAP and potentially our vulnerabilities. Moving on, according to U.S. Navy reporting, during redacted hours in redacted, a helicopter pilot, now that's new, a helicopter pilot and 2 weapon systems officers, or WSOs or WISOs, visually observed several, keyword, redacted. Several what? Redacted. Objects moving approximately and redacted. One of the WISOs, redacted, approximately redacted, 5 redacted objects, which redacted. The WISO reported he redacted, but redacted. The pilot and the other WISO redacted the redacted objects. So now so let's dissect this as silly as that just read. Five what objects? Not really sure, but they're 5 objects. Obviously, it's mentioned here. Can we safely deduce that those are the UAP that were encountered? So 5 UAP objects of some kind? I think that may be a safe assumption. It was a helicopter pilot, so there's not many of those around. We keep hearing about the F-18 encounters over the years, but not a helicopter. So that seemingly is a new case, or not one that's ringing a bell for me. And then talks about what the weapon system officers, they were doing something, but essentially nothing was working. So when you read that, as silly as it sounds, read between the lines, so to speak, and you can start seeing some interesting encounters be revealed. Moving on to the next section, you can see here juxtaposing the public report with the classified. UAP probably lack a single explanation. That's a given, and so I was glad to see that in there. But you'll see here it comes in the classified version, numerous paragraphs, full paragraphs, fully redacted. The citations were military plans, weapon systems or operations, intelligence activities, including covert action or sources and methods, and G, vulnerabilities or capabilities. So it's pretty much like everything that is being cited here, and that is broken down in 2 different paragraphs, but fully redacted. Now we're getting into the explanations, the breakdown of the explanations of what UAP are. These are essentially the categories, right? Where do they fit? Not everything is, unknown for good. So they brought a list of the possible explanations. In the public report, it was reflected as well. Airborne clutter. These objects include birds, balloons, recreational unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, or airborne debris like plastic bags that muddle a scene and affect an operator's ability to identify true targets, such as enemy aircraft. Public version put a period there. The classified version expanded on airborne clutter. This category can also include, and a bunch of redactions, we recognize that, bunch of redaction, with the, and the rest is redacted. Not sure what they can redact on airborne clutter, but there you have it. The next paragraph, also under airborne clutter, we have examples of pilots who stated that they redacted. G would be, which is the citation on these redactions, vulnerabilities or capabilities of systems. Okay, maybe somehow that's justifiable, but I just found it silly. The next category, natural atmospheric phenomena. Natural atmospheric phenomena includes ice crystals, moisture, and thermal fluctuations that may register on some infrared and radar systems. Public report, put a period there. Classified report gave another line and a half, all redacted. Underneath that was a really bizarre deletion from the public version, which was released in the classified version. Under natural atmospheric phenomena, although we cannot definitively classify any UAP occurrences in our data set as caused by atmospheric phenomena, we also cannot rule out the possibility that these factors may account for some of what pilots have observed. Well, of course it could account for some, that's why it's there. But still, the key part here is that you could not identify one, not a single one. So is that vulnerabilities or your, what is it? Yeah, vulnerabilities or capabilities of your system or lack of capabilities? Maybe, but why would you need to take that out of the report, the public version? Not really sure. Interesting nonetheless that that was taken out. Next reason, U.S. government or industry developmental programs. Some UAP observations could be attributable to classified U.S. government airspace programs or systems under development by commercial airspace firms. We were unable to confirm, however, that these systems accounted for any of the UAP reports we collected. Public version put a period there. Classified version goes on. We have, and then insert 4.5 redacted lines. We have what? If they couldn't confirm anything as being classified tech or something like that, what extra information did the classified version have that we're not seeing? Not really sure. Next reason, foreign adversary systems. A lot of people talked about this, especially in Congress, that some were saying they thought that that's what it was. When it came to UAPs, others said that it was not China or Russia. So what is it? A lot of speculation there. But within the report, foreign adversary systems, some UAP may be intelligent collection platforms developed by China, Russia, another nation, or non-governmental entity. Public version put a period there. Classified version went on. They could also be a what? Redacted lines worth of redaction. Although, and then a couple more redacted lines. In addition, and a few more redacted lines after that. So they definitely expand this section, but we don't know why. We have no idea why. Even though it doesn't say it here, later in the report, and I'll get to that in a moment, but later in the report, it does say that not a single incident they were able to connect to any foreign adversary system. So obviously that is something that, although they tried to do, were unable to do it. And then going on, the other category remained exactly the same. UAP threatened flight safety and possibly national security. That section here was expanded. Ongoing airspace concerns. We have, in the classified version, we have documented flight safety concerns and insert a couple redacted lines there. And then it goes on to what was in the public report. When aviators encounter safety hazards, they are required to report these concerns. Towards the end of the paragraph, you'll see some extra information, primarily all redacted. Next paragraph, same deal. And then redacted. A pilot briefly observed, couple redacted lines. However, and then redacted. What it's showing here is that Congress, the Senate, they were getting additional information about the cases and what was going on. The fact that they didn't change that a lot of the categories and explanations existed, the mundane explanations, they still couldn't fit anything into those categories. So what are they redacting here? Again, it could just be vulnerabilities, and that's fine. But why aren't they telling us what exactly these pilots were observing? What is so classified about that? Because they can't fit it into any category. If it was a Russian drone technology, classified technology, we were seeing it with classified systems. Okay, maybe some of that is justifiable. But again, they say none of that was doable. They were not able to connect any foreign adversary to the 143 remaining cases. Why? Is it really just our vulnerability? I would really hope not. Next section, potential national security challenges. You see up top here, definitely identical or near identical to the public report, followed by a pretty big full paragraph, fully redacted. Intelligence activities, intelligence sources and methods, and vulnerabilities or capabilities of systems, all cited here and all removed. Explaining UAP will require analytic collection and resource investment section, top of which pretty much echoes the public version. We have an extra paragraph here. Given the redacted, the UAPTF also plans to explore how best to leverage the capabilities of non-DoD departments and agencies to enable effective and efficient transfer of data and redacted among the DoD. redacted, and the law enforcement community. So obviously here, I'm not really sure. Citation, intelligence activities, intelligence sources and methods, and cryptology. I don't understand where the sharing of information is something that they wanted to omit from the public version. Maybe some of the systems that they utilized, I can understand. That explains some of these redactions, but why they want that removed of the coordination, not really sure. Moving on, the expand collection section, you'll see again, top is very reminiscent to the public report. Underneath that, big fat black square, all redacted. So definitely some expanding of the collection. Now, just to remind you what that said, the UAPTF is looking for novel ways to increase collection of UAP cluster areas when U.S. forces are not present as a way to baseline standard UAP activity and mitigate collection bias in the data set. So essentially, if they're only collecting data from military installations, it's going to be a bias towards military installations because that's all they look at. So they're trying to set up ways to collect information. That was in the public report. What's down here obviously was not. Here's another one for you FOIA people out there. Some of you may find it briefly interesting, but the FOIA people, this is what you look for. Increase investment in research and development. Public version had the same paragraph with one difference. The UAPTF has indicated that additional funding for research and development could further the mission objectives defined by a Deputy Secretary of Defense Action Memo 23 July 2020. Such investments should be guided by a UAP collection strategy, UAP R&D technical roadmap, and a UAP program guide. This highlighted section here, that memo, has never, and has yet to be released to the public, nor was it even known. And so this is the kind of stuff that was removed in the public version, which indicates this is likely a classified memorandum that they did not want out into the public. My case with ODNI brought its existence out to the public. I've already filed a case for this. We'll see if it's declassified. I'm hopeful it is. It's possible if it is a classified memo, it was classified because at the time it was written, the UAP research effort or the task force may have been a classified topic at the time. Later, it was obviously revealed, but that is something that for, again, the FOIA people out there, you really look for. For the UAP UFO crowd, that's just interesting because there's more documents hopefully to come. Now, remember I talked about the tables and some of the pins I told you to put in while we were talking about the report. You'll see nothing here on the public side because this is all brand new. This was just in the classified version, and it breaks down UAP reports by. This could be pilots. Again, this is just purely speculation, but maybe just, were these a pilot category, a ground observer, radar tech operator, who knows? But they have what appears to be 4 different categories of UFO observations by, maybe sensors is another one, radar only, whatever the 4 categories are. And then underneath that are likely the numbers. So you'll see here the heading in the table, you see a blue color there for watching visually. These are probably, again, those categories. This is probably the number. Jumping down here, UAP detected by, and then it was redacted. Unidentified aerial phenomena, redacted headers here. In over half of the 144 reports from U.S. government observers, redacted. Unidentified aerial phenomena. Then a bunch of redaction. So this could likely be maybe another table. The headers classified, who knows? But obviously a lot of information here they do not want you to know. Figure 1 is likely the most controversial redaction, one that everybody wants to see. I've already briefly mentioned it. Well, here is likely a visual breakdown of the common shapes that are seen in these cases. So the unidentified aerial phenomena header, you can see up here under the figure 1, some redactions here. Observers frequently described unidentified aerial phenomena as likely that shape, though, and then some redaction here, such as a, and then a bunch more redaction, shaped objects. So for whatever reason, yet again, they do not want these common shapes revealed. Here is the table where they break that down. And then the less common irregular shapes, you can do that speculate on what is there as well. But how I translate this, I was asked by The Hill. I got to do an interview with The Hill the other day. How I translate this, I was a little surprised by the question. Essentially, how I translate this to echo the same definition here, these are just simply a breakdown of shapes, whether they be drawings, photos, or both, of the types of UAP being seen. Are they photos? Are they diagrams? Well, there's one of three possibilities. They're all photos or screenshots from video. They are all diagrams or sketches or a mixture of both. If I were to bet $1 right now, I would say a mixture of both. The less common irregular shapes, same deal, probably maybe a one-off encounter or something very, very minimal, but they wanted to notate it as well. My guess is it's a mixture of both. I'm veering away from the report. This slide is not in the report, but I wanted to show you guys an example of what might be under there. This is a photograph captured by a Snoopy team that I believe was from the USS Stout, but I was able to get this recently declassified and released. But you'll see here photographs that were taken. This came up in a UAP related case. You'll see here this is an obvious drone. So I'm not saying that this is anything but it goes under a UAP category. And so would we see stuff like this under there? I'm not really sure, but it's possible. You'll also see here in that particular case, there was a exempted photograph here. Was it another angle? Was it another craft? What was it? Who knows? But you can see that some they will share when it comes to UAP categories, some they will not. I will use this in my appeal and my plea for saying you should not redact shapes and descriptors. So my argument is, in very short, I mean, it'll be in much bigger length in the appeal, but essentially, if you guys have descriptors, identifying markings, something like that, a caption that will connect it to a classified system, whatever it might be, those are acceptable redactions. However, when it comes to the shapes, those I do not believe are justified. And that is what I'm going to hone in on and hopefully get, maybe not if there are captions, maybe not all the captions, but hopefully the shapes or something that will reveal what they are photographing or videotaping or whatever they may be. Here's another appendix that was entirely new in the classified version that was released. Obviously, you can see about 50% redacted here. Collection by intelligence discipline. And it breaks down the way that they collect the intelligence, geospatial intelligence, or in other words, information derived from an analysis of images and data associated with a particular location. There's a full agency that is dedicated to this called the NGA, not the NGIA, as many people reference it, but rather the NGA. That's the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. Not an agency that's talked about a lot, but the NGA obviously plays a role in this discussion and in these investigations. And in case maybe in the live chat right now, I'm sure somebody is saying, hey, have you ever hit the NGA with requests? Yes, I have. Years ago, it came back negative when it came to UFO related information. But given the information gleaned in this report, I did file last year because they did talk about geospatial intelligence in the public report as well. They just didn't have this appendix. You can also see SIGINT, or signals intelligence, is broken down. That's the intelligence gathering by the interception of signals, whether communications between people or from electronic signals. They also use HUMINT, or human intelligence. That is intelligence gathered by means of interpersonal contact. MASINT, or MASINT, measurement and signals intelligence. I'm going to read to you the exact Department of Defense definition for this one. This is measurement and signal intelligence. It's the scientific and technical intelligence information obtained by quantitative and qualitative analysis of data collected by specific technical sensors. The data are collected to identify distinctive features of the source, emitter, or sender, and to facilitate its subsequent identification and or measurement. So that is a breakdown of MASINT or MASINT. Appendix B also is brand new. Federal Bureau of Investigation Support of Attribution Efforts. Given the national security implications associated with potential threats posed by UAP operating in close proximity to sensitive military activities, installations, critical infrastructure, or national security sites, the FBI is positioned to use its investigative capabilities and authorities to support deliberate DoD and interagency efforts to determine attribution. In other words, they're calling on the FBI to help out with this effort. Although they were briefly mentioned in the public report, that mention was only a line or two. However, in this appendix, obviously you can see a lot is redacted, but expanded. So obviously for an investigator like me, this gives me a new target, even though I already have hit them with FOIA requests last year based on their mention in the report. This shows me that they have a much bigger involvement in the UAP effort, the research effort. And whether or not that continues on after the UAP task force and this AOI MSG office that is seemingly still getting their feet on the ground, the FBI is going to be heavily involved. I'm a little surprised at that because there are investigative arms within the Navy and within the Air Force that can do those types of investigations. In fact, even when you're talking about, because the report talked about it, UAVs, commercial UAVs, I've gotten NCIS, the Navy Criminal Investigative Service, I've gotten those NCIS reports investigating a commercial level drone going into a naval installation. So I've gotten those before, not UAP or UFOs in the sense that we're talking about it, but regardless, they do that type of investigation. So their involvement of the FBI was a little bit surprising to me, but maybe they're expanding outside the walls of the U.S. military, and so they have to get involved a law enforcement agency like that. So that's understandable. I was still surprised nonetheless. Here's a side-by-side of the public report, which in the public report was Appendix A. In the classified was Appendix C, the definition of key terms. Really, the only difference here was the inclusion of range fowler in the classified version, even though you can see here they kept it as a footnote. Why, I'm not sure. I think it was an oversight. But regardless, there is an addition of likely another word or terminology, a key term, if you will, that is 100% redacted from the word or phrase itself through the definition. So completely removed there. Pretty interesting. Maybe the citation is military plans, weapon systems, or operations, and vulnerabilities or capabilities of systems. That to me doesn't make sense unless they have some kind of phrasing that talks about their vulnerability. Not really sure. So that citation I'm also fighting in the appeal because I think the definition of something shouldn't be classified when it comes to vulnerabilities or military plans. There are classified keywords, and there have been in the past that have been declassified, but when it comes to this, it didn't make sense, so I'm going to fight that as well. Appendix B in the public report was Appendix D in the classified version. This was a breakdown of the Senate report accompanying the Intelligence Authorization Act for fiscal year 2021. Again, was identical. No changes there. And that brings us to the end. Hopefully with that deep dive, it gives you guys an understanding that even though it's frustrating at first glance, you see this information, you see how much redaction there is, and it's frustrating. But very much like the public report when we got that, after that frustration that it was only 9 pages with the public report, and I was frustrated as well, you walk away, you take a deep breath, you come back, sit down, and you start digesting the information. For me, if you guys recall from that video, for those who saw it, it spawned over 50 Freedom of Information Act requests to about 13 or 14 different agencies and military branches. My point is that at first glance, things can be frustrating or seemingly worthless. But when you come back and really look, you now have a partial glimpse into what is being bantered about in classified material and given to the Senate and other members of the House. And when you digest that, you realize that there is much more to the story, that they are getting much more to the story. A news channel, I'm not going to say it now, it should air by the time this drops, but I'll give it in the live chat if it does. I just never like to talk about it until it actually airs. So a newscaster asked me today, what about the senators that have come out or congressmen that have come out and said, hey, there's really a high likelihood that this is just, either a classified piece of technology or a foreign adversary. And, everybody's kind of going to the alien route, but evidence kind of points elsewhere. Of course, that's a paraphrased question and quote, but there have been those that have come out and said that. There's also been those that have come out and said, no, it's not that. But regardless, they had asked me today, hey, how do you respond to that? And my response is simple. And this is the value of a document like this, that even though it is heavily redacted, it shows you that what those politicians are saying that have that angle, that there is a high likelihood of either a foreign adversary or our own technology maybe being rumored about and so on. Not a single case in the classified version was referenced as being either. Not one. Now, there may be certain logical reasons on why, but regardless, when you look at that fact and you see those politicians telling you before this came out, telling you, it's a high likelihood of that. But now we've learned that the public version did not go into the level of detail that they got in the classified version. And in that classified version, not a single shred of evidence will reinforce what they are saying. Not anything. The military was not able to peg one foreign adversarial drone or piece of technology or technological platform to any of the UAP that were investigated. In addition, they were not able to peg one single case on any classified piece of U.S. technology. That to me is a fascinating revelation, that with the resources behind the U.S. government and the U.S. military, they still could not fit the cases into their own breakdown of mundane explanations, of logical explanations. They couldn't do it, not once. So I think we have to look at that and see value, that even though we can't see under all of the black, that we can't see all under every redaction, we can start filling in some of the blanks and then start to question why. Why will they not give us the capability of some of these craft? Now, some of you may have heard me say in the past that there is a high potential that some of these cases are military tech, and I stand by that. That's the definition of potential. It could be. It's a possibility. I got a lot of heat for saying that on a Showtime documentary by J.J. Abrams, where I said it's possible that the 2004 incident is a classified platform, a classified piece of tech. I still stand by that. Even though the military doesn't, and I'm contradicting their own words here, I still think that we have to wrestle with that possibility that things are being withheld, maybe from a task force that created this. I believe it was Christopher Mellon who said that there were efforts within the United States government and military to keep all of the information from the task force. Well, if that's true, then we still have a possibility there. So I've been called out by some of my haters about that and wanted to quickly address it, as I don't feel that it's a contradiction to accept the report says one thing, but also the realization that the report could be wrong. Because if what Christopher Mellon is saying and those surrounding him have told him that the task force did not get all of the information, it is quite possible that a highly classified platform or piece of technology was withheld from them. And so when they create a document like this, even though it's going to Congress, do you really think the military cares if Congress is misinformed? That when they create it and they are not given every piece of the puzzle, that there are going to be errors. And I think that that's why I stand by the possibility that some of this is potentially a classified platform or piece of technology that we are not aware of yet, or even that the task force was being told about. All possibilities, all good ideas, not only from me, but from a lot of people out there. But at the end of the day, it's speculation because we just don't know yet. I will keep you guys informed of the appeal process as well. As of the recording of this, I have 90 days to respond with an appeal. I will likely not wait anywhere near that, but I like to take a deep breath sometimes, sleep on it, read the document a few times, and you know what? Even doing videos like this allow me to see things while I'm talking to all of you and to see your questions that give me ideas on how to fight some of these redactions, and sometimes see things that I didn't see the first, the second, or the 3,000th time I've read something. Doing this is definitely a help for me as well. So thank you guys for sticking through this deep dive. I don't do this level of detail often, but I feel with this particular document, it was definitely warranted. And hopefully it gave you guys an idea that even though it is frustrating, as I mentioned, you look at the information and really dissect every character, and it tells a much different story than just, oh, they're holding it from us and I'm really mad. Rather, it tells a story in itself. So hopefully you guys got some use out of that. Please, if you could help me out, as I said in the beginning of the show, if you're watching, a thumbs up really does help. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. If you feel so inclined, a lot of this work is motivated and supported by Patreon subscribers. If you decide that $1 a month or whatever you'd like to do, it supports this channel and these efforts, because sometimes it's not cheap, and you do have to do filing fees on some occasions, in some cases, reproduction, search charges, all sorts of stuff. 100% of all of that, super chats, if you saw any come in on the broadcasting of this, 150% go to the channel. And hopefully you guys see that when it comes to the quality of what I try and create for you. So truly, thank you. Biggest help is spreading the word. So even though you decide not to do a Patreon, don't worry. Everything still remains free. Nothing has ever been behind a paywall on theblackvault.com for more than 25 years since I started. However, it really does help support the site and allows me to kind of expand the channel, so to speak. So with that, thank you. I really do appreciate it. I'm looking forward to reading your comments. If you are listening to the audio version, any type of review helps on the platform that you're listening on, whether it be iTunes or whatever it may be, but also on YouTube. Please put your comments below. Let me know what you think. Questions, I try and get to them, and maybe we'll do a live stream of a call-in show again. Get your questions that way. Thank you so much for listening again. This is John Greenewald Jr. signing off, and we'll see you next time.
Watch more podcast clips now on our YouTube channel. Go to Livewire Podcast Clips and watch more great podcast videos just like this one.